welcome back to Financial Hot Girl. This week we're talking about something that's been brewing up in my mental headspace for a while and has taken up a lot of space and conversations that I've had with family and friends more recently, and it's all about motherhood. Specifically choosing and exercising the choice in which to have kids or not. And this is a conversation I've been having a lot as someone who's 29. I've got friends who've had kids, who've had multiple kids, who are also grappling with this decision. When I say friends, I'm speaking specifically about the women in my life who are also pre-30, 30 and beyond. And personally, what I'm struggling with is the fact that I'm not anti-children, I'm not anti-motherhood, but the amount of thought I'm having to give to this decision is not just it's not just down to do I personally want kids or not. I'm also really worried about the institutional and systemic reasons as to why being a mom in today's society is just not something I actively desire right now. And something for our generation to really take note of is the fact that motherhood has become a little bit of a choice. Like for our generation, we're probably the first ones to admit and also have the, privilege to admit and acknowledge that it's a high stakes and highly identity related financial decision. And for me, my issues, as well as the women around me, to be honest, come from the fact that, the timing. I'm worried about the timing and when the right time is, if there is a right time, doesn't exist. I'm afraid of being punished professionally for doing this. Now, I'm not in corporate anymore, but the effects of taking on motherhood and having children, I think there are different things that negatively impact whether you're in corporate or whether you run a business and you're self-employed, either or. And honestly, feeling like it's a lose-lose situation, like whether I choose to have kids or not, there's something that I'm losing. And crucially, we are finally allowed to question this choice. And really importantly, I want to underline the fact that, hey, it's a choice for us. I feel like there's a little bit of advancement in the fact that motherhood isn't, or becoming a mom isn't this thing that's kind of just pushed on me. It's not something that I'm just expected to take on and do to a certain extent. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And while that's a privilege, like I've said, it just comes with all of these new pressures. So what I really want to hammer home is this episode is not a pros and cons list at all. It's an unpacking of the structures behind the fear, the guilt, the shame, the pressure, and the decision making behind this choice that we now have in front of us. Now, I really, when I was researching this episode, I really had to think about why motherhood actually feels like such a heavy topic for me and those around me that are kind of in that in-between stage, and those who've had kids. Now, historically, like I've mentioned at the beginning of the episode, motherhood was a bit of a default. Now, it's one of many life paths you can choose as a woman. But even though the choice has evolved with society, the actual system that supports us, that's the part that's not evolved yet. And let's just break that down. If I were to choose to have kids tomorrow, I risk financial loss. I absorb a lot of the domestic, the emotional, and the invisible labor associated with becoming a mum. My identity, and this is so important and so sad to me, my identity becomes a mum in contexts where men don't become dad first. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, so I'm just going to park all of my kind of annoying thoughts around that. And if I choose not to have kids, I risk judgment from society, my circles potentially, family. I risk isolation. I risk grief over, the choices that I might be making and saying no to. And most people don't feel like they're actually choosing something. They feel like they're trying to avoid the worst case scenario, right? That's something that the stuff that choice is rooted in, that narrative is rooted in, doesn't help anyone. And that's why this whole thing just feels so heavy. It just feels like either choice that you make as a woman, you're either giving up loads of things, you're gaining things, you're risking the loss. There's so many unknown variables and factors. And as someone personally who is quite type A, I'm an admitted control freak on the internet, that is just a terrifying decision because you can't undo either one. Like once you make either decision, it's kind of it's kind of done. Maybe not so much for not having kids, but there are ways to make that permanent as well. So that's a really short context as to why I personally think the decision just weighs in so much and makes the choice feel heavier than potentially it is. The economic reality of wanting to become a mom is just kind of annoying, and I try not to get angry about this because anger doesn't lead to much. I try to channel that into like creating this episodes like this and opening up the conversation. But let's just unpack this economic reality, right? Because the fact is there's a motherhood penalty, but there's a fatherhood bonus. And I found out about this because when I was researching this episode, I came across Stephanie O'Connell, who has a publication called Too Ambitious. It's amazing if you're in the financial hot girl universe and you love the balance of being soft, ambitious, but balancing that with reality. Stephanie O'Connell is so smart and a great writer, but she had an article around what the motherhood penalty meant for her. And essentially, if you're listening to this and you haven't actually heard of the motherhood penalty, it's when there is a measurable drop in a woman's income, career progression, or opportunities after she has children. And on average, these are the parts that sting and that add the heaviness to this decision or this choice in general. But on average, a woman in full-time work with children earns 31% less than full-time working fathers, and each child you have reduces your income by about 4%, even when you return to work. So this happens because this is the part that winds me up. This happens because you're assumed to be less committed. You're passed over for promotions or, stretch projects, and you're expected to work fewer hours or take leave. You're essentially trusted less because you're a mum. And it's worse for women who are in flexible freelance or creative work because the income drop is often, a lot steeper and it's not as recoverable as if you were in a 9-to-5 or PAYE job. And I noticed that it's still a thing. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, that's such a dated way of thinking, my company don't do that, whatever. I was watching a clip from Call Her Daddy with Phoebe Gates, and she was talking about when she was trying to raise investment for her app Thea, and the number one problem or the thing that they struggled with the most in those conversations, those investment conversations, was investors constantly asking them about when they would have children. And it riles you up, right? Like as a woman listening to that, you kind of think, what's the intention behind that question? Because would you ask a man that? As if having a child or desiring motherhood does impact your commitment to a business, your ability to actually make things work. Because point blank, men are not asked about impending fatherhood and how that is going to correlate to their commitment to a business and making it a success, right? And that leads me on to the fatherhood bonus, which is, I just can't believe, I guess if there was a penalty, there had to be a bonus, right? Annoying. Now, fathers basically, especially those in heterosexual relationships, they're often seen as more stable, more reliable, and more committed after having kids. Wonderful, right? What having kids can do to you. Their income goes up by 6% per child, and employers assume they'll work harder to support a family. They're in a settled life phase. They're a safe bet for leadership or responsibility. So the exact same life event, having a child, penalizes one parent and rewards the other. And just for a little bit of extra nuance, in households where the woman is the main earner, her income still drops more, up to 60% post-baby in some studies. So even when the numbers should work differently, the societal expectations completely override them. And Stephanie O'Connell, in her article, actually even admitted to this. She said that in her first year of business, after having her child, her business revenue dropped by 90%. Nothing hit her as hard as motherhood did, not even COVID. That's literally word for word from her article. And I don't really want to rattle through stats that support the fact that mums are penalized and dads are not. They're given bonuses, but there are so many things that support this that are really annoying. But it's not even just about the money. There are an emotional array of tolls as well. I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. It's just more, this is more like, I cannot believe this is real life laughing. Even with wealth or support, the shift in identity pre and post motherhood or entering motherhood is completely real, right? Because if we just get to the bottom of what becoming a mum means, there's loss of autonomy, there's loss of privacy, there's loss of ambition and time. And for most mums, and I have spoken to a lot of people in the research phase for this episode, for a lot of people who've had kids, there is an increase in the mental load that you carry. And this is mental load covers so many things. It covers a lot of things even before you have kids when you're in a relationship. It's little things like remembering important dates, remembering important healthcare appointments, remembering important dates for your children or child, and overall the expectations, not even just from society, but from your child. You're expected to be fulfilled by your child. You're expected to never complain. And you're also expected to bounce back from whatever giving birth does to you. And we know this in terms of women being worried about being able to bounce back physically from the process of growing a human inside of you, and emotionally and professionally being able to bounce back from like whatever dip is caused from having a child. You know, things like postpartum exist. There are so many things that are associated to the incredible act of literally growing a human inside of you, giving birth to it, and then trying to get your life back. And yet, many mothers feel resentment and guilt at the same time, shame for not being quote unquote grateful enough for the opportunity, and isolation from friends who haven't had kids. And these are all emotions and conclusions that I've drawn, like I said, from having conversations with real people in preparation for this episode. The conversations I was having with the real people that I asked off the back of having the newsletter go out last week, and I asked you guys for your opinions on this, it was like, I would say as a whole, it was quite negative, the sentiment to motherhood. So I jumped onto TikTok because I really wanted to understand culturally what is our approach to motherhood, you know, across continents. I was watching videos from UK creators, American creators, Australian creators, and there are a lot of people who document how they were mentally able to overcome this kind of like wobble in should I, shouldn't I? But there were an overwhelming amount of TikToks actually just stating that, stating more negative things related to motherhood. There was one TikTok by TikToker Jessie Song that was actually even titled Motherhood is a Scam. But in that TikTok, she basically talked about how her friend who has a live-in nanny, support from in-laws, and, you know, like financial resources to help with childcare and taking care of someone. She essentially described in that video that her friend who had all of these things still said, stick to your plan, don't have kids until you're 100% sure, and basically hinted at the fact that, you know, being child-free is a blessing. Think about this decision properly. And Stephanie O'Connell, Queen, also said in her article, even great privileges are not protection from the extremely gendered costs of parenthood. So the emotional toll exists, and I think takes up as much space as potentially the financial toll of motherhood when you're thinking about this decision. But let's talk about the child-free decision as well, because I feel like it's posed as this like opt-out, like I'm gonna choose not to do this and I'll be fine, I'll be better than all of you. It's not the case at all, right? Child-free women, they're not getting off easy. They're often also grieving a little bit of their decision. Now let's walk through that, because child-free people, or people who choose to be child-free, there's grief that exists for the future that you'd thought you'd have, the version of yourself who'd be a mum, and the milestones you'll never experience saying no to that lifestyle and that life decision. And even if you're confident in the choice, society will still punish you, won't it? It will assume you'll change your mind one day. It's just, you're just undecided, you're in a phase. It will suggest that your life is incomplete and make you feel like you're missing something and that you're not a whole person as you are. And finally, society will pit you against women who did choose motherhood, as if it's a battle between child-free and mums, which it is absolutely not, okay? I want to get that point and make it really clear in this episode. This is not a battle between two groups of women who've made different decisions. That's what society is kind of pushing onto us. And on top of that, many women, including myself, when I'm trying to think about whether I want to pursue having a child, I feel that choosing myself, like choosing my career, choosing my freedom, choosing potentially a more adventurous life, is still slightly taboo. And that it makes people like me who leaning more towards being child free a robot, not as emotional, and that something is wrong with us for not following through on our quote unquote maternal instincts or lack thereof. And the bottom line of this is that as women, we're asked to justify our child free choices and our child free lives in a way that men are just never asked to do this. Like, there are so many reasons for and against. Why do I need a reason for or against? I don't. A choice is a choice. That's it. And that leads me to what I think the real trap is here when we're thinking about motherhood and making this decision and how heavy this choice feels. It's the trap that everything feels very binary. It's like motherhood versus freedom. I even said it earlier, like it feels like choosing freedom, quote unquote, makes you a bad person. It's not as binary as we are made to think it is. And let's get into that because the way we talk about motherhood now often, not even often, all the time, sounds like you either have kids and sacrifice your identity, or you don't have kids and you stay powerful, but you're alone and you're this lone wolf. And it's a false binary, right? Both paths involve risk, they involve loss, and they involve a lot of meaning and feelings. And what's missing in both of those choices and those quote unquote options, as if they're real options, is the institutional infrastructure. And that's what it all comes down to. It's the fact that the infrastructure does not support well enough people and their choices. There are not sufficient leave policies that exist as a blanket statement across all jobs. There are no shared care responsibilities. There's no there's no all-encompassing cultural respect for all types of caretaking, not just biological motherhood. And for people without kids, a lack of good infrastructure creates resentment. Like when society supports parents properly, child-free people aren't left covering for them in workplaces, or they're not like taxed more emotionally because of the lack of support. And when care work is seen as a shared societal responsibility, then everyone benefits. It's not just people with kids. So it's things like universal healthcare, paid time off, mental health provisions. It means that you can take care of yourself and others, whether those others are elder family members, chosen family members, people in your community, without sacrificing your income. Child-free people, they also face major life transitions. Let's just please acknowledge that. Things like burnout, illness, grief, caretaking roles. And right now, they're not the ones that qualify for leave or flexibility. And it's because they're the ones who didn't reproduce. And I've experienced that firsthand, not firsthand myself, but someone very close to me. I've experienced how the infrastructure right now does not support people in caregiving roles or caretaking roles. And as part of the financial hot girl community, I hope that, whatever business you're building or business that you're working for right now is one where you can hopefully influence in a way that these infrastructures are set up in a helpful way that actually acknowledge people, full stop. And a great example of how this has literally been done super recently and in real time right now is how Simran Kaur is running Friends That Invest, formerly Girls That Invest, by implementing appropriate and sufficient policies for a member of her team who is going away on mat leave. And remember, at the bottom of this, If you're having to make a choice without the infrastructure there to support you, it is not making a choice, it's you using survival instincts to try and get by. Like that's essentially what it comes down to. And that's why things like being pit against each other, feeling like it's a very binary choice, that's why those things crop up. So the system should essentially just be designed for people, not just parents. And the goal is not about arguing about who has it harder. It's about building systems that don't require people to suffer in silence just to justify their choice. And hopefully we can start building microenvironments within our communities to support this while still pressuring for better institutional changes, because those are the things that's going to help us make choices that are rooted in our inner truths and aligned with our emotions over feeling like we're having to make the perfect decision. And that's kind of what I really want to drive home as part of rounding this episode up, is like, how do we reclaim this decision and understand what it takes to feel good about whatever decision it is that you do make. So for someone listening who is undecided or you're a little bit conflicted, ask yourself, what kind of support would I need to feel safe being a mother? And what kind of life would I design if I never became one? And ask yourself and think about those answers really deeply. Like, this takes a lot of mental work. And you should try and encourage yourself to think in seasons and not necessarily absolutes, because you might not be like a never have kids person. You might just be a not yet or a not like this. You can answer that with your own nuance, right? So let go of the perfect clarity that so many of us keep going for when we approach topics like this, and aim for making peace with the version of you that's making a decision with whatever information you have in front of you right now. It's the peace associated to that choice that you're kind of aiming for. And I actually did watch a super helpful TikTok that I will link in the show notes for a really practical reflection method. And the person in the TikTok actually did, and it's a video by TikToker Danny Duncan, and I think she's from New Zealand, and she essentially is talking about how to use your own emotional data to make a choice that gets you out of being stuck about motherhood. And essentially you pretend for a full day or weekend that you've 100% decided not to have kids. Then you ask yourself, how do I feel? What does my future look like? Am I relieved or am I sad? And then you flip it, and then you pretend that you've decided to have kids. And you ask yourself, what's coming up? Is it dread? Is it joy? Is it anxiety? Is it hope? And you're not looking necessarily for logic when you're thinking about this decision and practicing and using this reflection exercise. You're looking for like the felt response inside your body. What future is pulling you forward, and which one feels heavy in your body? And only you can answer that, and only you can feel that if you pretend for a weekend that you've made that decision. So what I would love for you to take away from this conversation and this topic is to, focus on asking yourself, how do I want to feel about this choice in 10 years time, versus what is the absolute right choice for me right now? Like, what is the right answer? And to quote Stephanie again, we're made to believe that these inequities that come with either choice are of our own making, that they're our own fault, and they're not. Like I've explained, the infrastructure that supports women, motherhood, and people with caring responsibilities is lacking majorly. And I hope that's something that this episode can help you make peace with, like the fact that these inequities are not of your own making, and that you can make a choice that's rooted in your inner truth, and not make a choice based on fear or guilt-based narratives that society put on us, essentially. There's nothing about the motherhood penalty that does make sense. And a good life is one where we feel aligned and not ashamed or pressured or guilty. So whatever your choice is, try to build a life that supports that choice, not the status or the binary characteristic of that choice. And with that, I will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for listening. do not forget to subscribe to the newsletter where we will be discussing all of these topics in a little bit more depth, and you can get involved in the actual research of this episode. A lot of the quotes will stay anonymous, just especially for this episode, because there were a lot of deep chats being had in my inbox. But yeah, subscribe to the newsletter and subscribe to the broadcast channel on the Instagram. It's Financial Hot Girl, and get involved with the conversations. There are lots of exciting things coming in the Financial Hot Girl universe. We are going to be so active. We're going to be so actionable. We are going to be so financially hot really soon. And with that, I will see you next time, guys. Bye.